Hello, everybody. Welcome to version 2.0 of the most genial conversation I'm going to have today between Jordan Genso and Jon Elgas, the two candidates for the Michigan 22nd District Senate seat. Jordan is the Democratic candidate and Jon is the Libertarian candidate. And in the interest of open communication and free conversation, we're going to talk about some fun stuff today. And you guys excited?
I'm very excited.
Definitely.
Okay, awesome. I'm torn between just listing the things I'd like to talk to you about or just wading through the minefield. Yeah.
No heads up. Just
I'm okay with being
sprung.
Yeah.
Well, took an interesting turn right out the gate. Thanks, Jon.
Yeah, not a problem.
All right, I'm going to try and play the role of the voting public in this conversation. I know last time we did this, we did a lot of deep dive talking into taxes and boring shit. That's also very important.
Yeah.
yes.
So today we're going to talk about really charged shit that is often single voter issue important.
Yeah.
So unpacking them one at a time. I'm going to get you your bearings. The items I have on the docket for today include, and hopefully we'll get to them all, there's no commitment that we will, but guns and gun control, LGBTQ plus rights, also known as human rights, racism, ageism, sexism, all of the isms, and abortion. All hot topics and all sometimes difficult to talk about without getting into a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, does anybody have a preference? Do either of you have did any of those go, oh my gosh, I really can't wait to talk about that?
I mean, I like discussing any of the culture topics.
Yeah.
Some are more relevant to a state legislative race than others, but even beyond what we'll be able to influence as the next state senator for this district, I think it's totally fine to have the discussion at even the national level of, okay, something like gun control, if you wanted to start there. I
do want to start there. And I'd like to, if we could, as we talk about these things, make sure and talk about them from a concept standpoint, and then, if possible, an actionable standpoint in the seat if you should win.
Yeah.
Because they're different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with guns. I feel like we should have a coin toss. Jon, do you want to go first? Do you want to try and tackle the guns from a concept standpoint?
Well, I can unless Jordan wants to go first.
No, you can go.
Oh, okay. I tend to have a very conservative outlook on things. So when you talk about things like guns, I tend to want to err on the side of more freedom. So, say a nonviolent felon. I would like a nonviolent felon to, someone who may have smoked, let's say, weed in the past and got arrested for it. Well, why can't he own a gun? So I would err on the side of give them more freedom and let them choose if they want to own a gun or not for defense purposes or to hunt or whatever they need it for. I'm not the one that should be able to control that.
Okay.
So, that's kind of how I look at things, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
I think so. So you would be, and I'm going to add to what you said, hopefully not inappropriately. So for violent felons, whatever is in place today you're comfortable with, but maybe modifying for nonviolent felons only, the right to own.
I would actually I would want to take a look at how to reform those gun laws so that we can, so when they're done with their sentence or whatever the crime is, I wouldn't have a problem with them owning a gun, but I don't think that is, honestly, I don't think that's practical in today's day and age.
Okay.
So I would try to reform that, but that wouldn't be a top priority.
Got it. on the radar if we're having a conversation about it, but
Yes.
maybe not taking that.
I wouldn't be taking a lead or trying to push anything through on that. Out of
Understood.
practical sense.
So from a implementation standpoint, maybe not so much on your radar.
Right.
Okay. That was crystal clear. Jordan, how about you and guns?
Okay. So the way I look at the Second Amendment in general is I am a supporter of the Second Amendment in its stated purposes or design to enable the citizenry to be able to defend themselves. I think, though, that when it comes to firearms, they are designed in a variety of ways for a variety of purposes. And some of those purposes are hunting or defense. Some of them are not for hunting or defense, but more for combat purposes. There's a reason why the military uses one firearm rather than another. Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to argue with
Oh,
you,
yeah.
but I am the general voting
Yes.
public here. Would not a combat weapon be considered also a defense weapon in a certain circumstance? If you're defending yourself against your government,
Okay.
a tyrannical turn, and I'm not saying that I have a horse in this race,
Right,
but in a hypothetical scenario where you feel that you need to defend yourself against this tyrannical United States government, wouldn't you need those weapons too? Wouldn't you, in fact, only have a shot of winning with those weapons?
I do not believe that the Second Amendment protects our rights to take on the government.
Got it.
I think that that is outside the scope of the purpose of the Second Amendment.
Got it.
And not to sidetrack us too much, but,
okay.
you know,
We love rabbit trails. All
yes.
three of us do. Let's go.
I think it's fun to look at the Second Amendment in relation to the Third Amendment. Now, most people have no idea what the Third Amendment is.
Clearly, I don't.
Yeah.
Go.
It's that whether or not the government can force you to house soldiers in your home during peaceful times. Mm-hmm. Totally random constitutional amendment that has no applicability to us today. But the question is, why is it there? And I say it's there for the same reason the Second Amendment is there, because when these amendments were being written, they were drawing on recent history as examples of, okay, these were things that occurred recently. These are things we don't want the federal government to be able to do. Therefore, we're going to write these constitutional amendments to prohibit the federal government from doing it. Leading up to the Civil War or the Revolutionary War, you had the British monarchy forcing the colonial people to house British soldiers in their homes. And that was something that even, in 1789, about, 12 years later, there was still bad blood about all of that. And that was something that, okay, the people writing the Bill of Rights, they felt strongly enough, like, yeah, we can't allow our federal government to be doing that. Likewise, with the Second Amendment, where it talks about how you have a well-regulated militia and their right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There are stories of what was happening back then. General Washington, I believe it was in New England somewhere, where he's fighting the British. And then after the battle is done, he's going to take the Continental Army with him south. And the militia members that were fighting alongside the Continental Army, they were going to be just going back to their farms and going back to their lives while the regular, army then moved on. General Washington had the militia present their arms and then confiscated their weapons in order to supply the Continental soldiers because they were so undersupplied. That is the sort of incident that is fresh in the minds of the people writing the Bill of Rights. Like, hey, here the army just confiscated the militia.
This is like a newly divorced woman saying, I'm not going to go on a date with another alcoholic because that guy was a drunk.
Right, yeah.
Right? Something?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're drawing on your recent past to try to then make rules as to what you're going to prohibit occurring again in the future. So that's why, just like why this Third Amendment is there, that's why the Second Amendment is there, is because you have those examples of militia members having their firearms confiscated.
Well, hypothetically, you weren't there, but it's hypothetically, not to be a jerk.
Yeah.
But okay, so conceptually,
Yes.
you support the Second Amendment as stated for defense purposes,
Yes.
people's right to bear arms. The conversation sounds like it's around what is considered arms that are protected.
Yes. That I would say that I have a distinction between, not all firearms are equal in my view.
Yeah, and it is my opinion is if the government can own it, I should have the right to own it as well.
So no distinction between...
distinction because as I know it was one of the founding fathers, I believe it was Jefferson, though, that said that we have the right and moral responsibility to overthrow a tyrannical government.
Okay.
And it is for that reason that we have the Second Amendment. So when our government gets out of hand, we can overthrow it with weapons if need be.
Okay. So another...
Now I'm saying that's not
also
the first way.
And you weren't there, so
Yeah,
it's all
I
just
wasn't.
hearsay.
I wasn't.
This isn't court either.
Yes.
All right, so back to Jordan. For an implementation conversation, is there anything that rises as an actual actionable item?
Yes and no. Now, a lot of what I would like to see occur with regards to firearms is at the national level, because when it comes to regulating which type of firearms you're going to allow the population to have, if you do it on a state-by-state basis, the state borders are so porous, it really doesn't matter.
Oh, I can't. This is going to feed right over to abortion next, I think.
But, so I take the view, okay, we currently regulate fully automatic firearms pretty strictly, and I am a strong advocate for those restrictions. And likewise, I would point to those as being fairly successful at keeping them out of the hands of people who want to do a mass shooting. Like you hear about school shootings, they're occurring with the firearms that are readily available to the general public, not those like fully automatic firearms, which are more strictly regulated. And it's not because that shooter wouldn't prefer a fully automatic firearm. Surely, if that's their intent, is to kill as many people as possible, they would acquire a fully automatic firearm to do so if they could, but the regulations are in place and it successfully prevents them from acquiring those. So I point to that as evidence that gun laws can work. And B, I view that as totally within the bounds of the Second Amendment, not a violation of it. And so, I mean, when you say that you would think the public should have any firearm that the government can have, do you think that those restrictions on fully automatic firearms violate the Second Amendment?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Because the Second Amendment states shall not be infringed. So any law restricting it, in my view, is infringing on that right. So it's a literalist view.
Okay. And what do you think the outcome would be if fully automatic firearms were as readily available as all others?
Well, I think...
And how far do we want to go down this what do you think would happen if path? Like seriously, because...
Okay.
I mean, and I'll just kind of, and I'll say this. I think that, some people try to, or those prone to mass murdering, or probably would buy those guns to try to do that. But if you have a well-armed citizenry, which we have here in the United States, and they're allowed to carry their guns where they need to be, they're also the good guy has a gun and can take care of
potential for self-regulation.
Right.
Understood.
Okay. So one area of implementation, though, that I would be very interested in putting forward that A, could be done at the state level, B, I think would be fairly common ground. We currently have restrictions in place on who can obtain alcohol. Mm-hmm. Minors are not allowed to possess alcohol.
Right.
And if you or I or any of us were to give alcohol to a minor, we as the supplier would be committing a crime.
Right.
Yes.
I don't see any reason why the same should not occur if I'm giving a firearm to somebody who could not legally possess a firearm.
Is that not the case already?
I am not committing a crime if I just say that I didn't know that this person can't have a firearm and I sold them a firearm off eBay or whatever.
So to go back to John's example, if we'd had I guess you referenced what did you say? The violent felon, the one who's currently regulated. You're saying right now, if I gave a violent felon who can't have a weapon, I'm not committing a crime.
The government,
that's interesting.
Yeah, they would have to argue that you knew that he was a violent felon that couldn't obtain it.
Interesting.
And I don't see any justification for that current status quo.
And that can be handled on a state-by-state basis right now.
I mean, I believe our state government could, just in the state of Michigan, any firearm transactions or just transfers, doesn't even have to be a sale. If you supply a firearm to somebody and they can't legally possess it, you as the supplier should be criminally liable, just as if it was alcohol and you're providing it to a minor. I think that should be common ground.
Do you agree with that, John?
Under our current system,
yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
But here's a question for you. What happens if I steal your gun and go out and commit a crime? Are you still responsible for supplying me the gun?
No more so than if it was alcohol and a kid breaks into your garage and steals alcohol out of your garage. You're not going to be criminally liable. Now, do I believe that gun owners should have a responsibility to secure their firearms and potentially be criminally liable if their firearms are not properly secured? I am definitely open to those regulations, depending on, obviously there's a line at which, it's too burdensome. But yes, I mean, if somebody is reckless and just leaving a firearm, in your case, if fully automatic firearms are legal, if they just left one on the side of, at the sidewalk, like they would a bike, and somebody comes along and takes it, and that's a reckless behavior, that should be criminal. So, I mean, there's a line to draw.
Oh, the lines get so wiggly so quickly, though,
Yes.
don't they?
Yeah, and most gun owners, I'd say 99+% are responsible with their guns anyway. So, I understand that my example is probably not going to happen. More than likely.
Well, the extreme examples are where you can make really clear points. So
Yes.
I'm a fan.
Yes.
I'm a fan. Okay. So any last words, untapped bits that you have, either of you, about guns?
No,
You are for more restrictions and...
I would like to see the federal government. Okay.
Yep.
When I think of the assault weapons ban
Yes.
in the 90s, I look back at that and I don't think, oh, wow, that was some dystopian hellscape of the government being too oppressive, and like we weren't under tyranny back then. That being allowed to lapse, I think that was a mistake, allowing that assault weapons ban to lapse. And so I would like to see at the federal level them reinstate something that targets those firearms that are designed for offensive purposes, for military combat. Yes, in theory, anybody could use that weapon for defensive purposes, but you or I, we don't need a firearm that can take on 12 enemies that are out to kill us. No, we just need a shotgun. We need something that can properly be used to defend our property and not need to kill
Clearly,
multiple.
you have not seen Walking Dead.
But so I would like to see the federal government treat firearms designed for combat the same way they treat fully automatic firearms. That's my position at the federal level. At the state level, yes, a responsibility for anybody supplying a firearm, do a background check. If you do a background check on the person you're giving a firearm to and they pass the background check, you have absolved yourself of any liability if for some reason that background check was inaccurate.
John, do you want to summarize your position?
I say more guns for more people and we'll have a safer country.
Understood. Okay. So we flirted with rolling into another really charged topic, when we were talking about state lines and how, what did you call it? You didn't say they were holy. What did you say they were?
Porous.
Porous, that's right. I want to make a church joke right now, but since we're talking about abortion, I will refrain. And let's move into abortion as a topic. This year especially, it's on the front of a lot of people's minds. Who wants to take the first step? Okay, it's your turn, Jordan.
So, I mean, I think
Concept and then implementation.
Well, and so I'm going to start with implementation of that. We have a very pressing issue as potential state legislators. We owe it to the public to make it clear if, for some reason, the ballot measure that would enshrine in our state constitution a right to abortion, if that were not to pass, or if it were not to be allowed on the ballot, although I believe they just ruled today it will be on the ballot. But if for some reason that does not occur, then in theory, the 1931 law will be the one that's taking effect. And so we owe it to the voters to make it clear, would we want to overturn that law? And absolutely, I would be a vote to overturn the 1931 law and protect a woman's right to make her own medical decisions, because my position in concept here is just that, those pregnancy decisions should not be mandated by the government, and it should remain between the pregnant woman and her doctor. And I'm going to trust the medical community to enforce their Hippocratic standards in order so that way doctors are not doing harm. And if the medical community properly regulates doctors, then there's not going to be any doctors who are performing those truly horrific hypothetical abortions at like 9 months and everything's healthy and all that. Like that, those don't occur. And the reason they don't occur is because there's no doctors that would be doing those. Mm-hmm. And so I think the status quo that we've had for the last several decades was sufficient to address this issue.
Okay.
So I just want to clarify, in theory, you're okay with allowing abortion through all 9 months? I'm just curious.
I don't believe that the government can properly step in and in the nuanced scenarios in which abortion is being considered, a politician should play no role in that decision. It should be, I'm going to put my faith in the medical community to determine, okay, this is a legitimate, a abortion that does not violate the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. If a doctor views that as within their acceptable practice, I would rather trust them than the government to make that decision, because any restriction, anytime you put it in the hands of the government to make the decision, they're not going to know the nuance. They have to write a law that somehow accounts for all of the very personal, nuanced, situational aspects of, if
short of defining every possible scenario at every possible point of a pregnancy, it becomes an impossible task, I think, is what you're trying to say.
Because even if you have an exception for the life of the mother, what percentage risk to the mother's life does that exception kick in? If you're writing it in law, you can't really do, does a doctor need to have 100% certainty, or can they have 20% certainty? Either way, you're still leaving it up to the medical community. I just think the government should have no role whatsoever. It's between the woman and her doctor.
Even though, are you okay with, a woman consents to having sex, she gets pregnant. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want the kid. Mm-hmm. You okay with an abortion at that point?
Right.
I'm just asking.
Me personally, or do I think that the government should step in and tell her what her decision has to be?
As a state senator, what?
Your concept response.
I would not want the government to be telling her that she can't. Now,
I'm just trying to understand.
Because, you can ask questions about, my own personal views on things. And, people do crazy stuff all the time that I personally may not agree with, but I wouldn't want the government stepping in. And so somebody who, gets face tattoos and looks all crazy, that's not, I may morally judge that person for better or worse. We should all be less judgmental. But if I were to, I wouldn't want the government stepping in and telling that person they can't get a face tattoo. I mean, there's the difference between what I personally think of whatever situation and what I think the government should be doing on my behalf. And I believe when it comes to abortion, the government should not be stepping in on my behalf and making any decision whatsoever.
Okay. I think I understand where you're coming from. Okay.
Okay. You want to tackle it, John? What's your concept position on abortion in the state of Michigan?
Oh, I believe it's going to be the exact opposite of Jordan's. Again.
Well, let's do it. It's what we're here for.
It's fun that way.
Yeah. And I would allow abortion. I would support bills that would allow abortion in cases of rape and for the health of the mother, and limit it to that. Now, as far, you brought up the point, at what stage do we, for the medical, what percentage would you leave that up as a state legislator, which I think is a good question. I would leave that percentage up to the doctor and the mom and dad.
I don't understand.
So, if the doctor believes that a 20% chance of the life of the mother and child, there's a 20% chance that both are going to die, it's not worth the risk. If the doctor's honest with the mom and dad, then they can make the decision, kind of bring up his concerns and stuff to them, and then the decision can be made at that point in time.
Okay, I'm supposed to be general public, and my personal views are going to trickle over on this topic because
that's fine.
Because I'm trying to imagine how you make a law that says you can't do this medical procedure unless your doctor really believes that it's going to risk your life. Don't I then just need a doctor to say those words, kind of like a medical marijuana card?
Yes, but I think that would deter a lot of people from pursuing abortions. Okay. Just because they don't want the child.
Okay.
Do you understand what
I think so. It's a deterrent rule because it becomes a little risky and possibly a pain in the ass, and you'd have to find a doctor who kind of would be a little, I don't know.
I mean, but that as far as the percentages, I would want the medical community, the woman's doctor, to say, hey, this is worrisome. You should consider this.
Okay, so there was another point of confusion, and forgive me if I'm stepping on your points.
No.
It's literally, I'm trying to unpack what you're saying so that the people listening can understand also. If you're going to leave it to the doctor to decide.
Well, the doctor and the parent.
The doctor and the pregnant woman.
Yes.
Are deciding whether or not an abortion is the right medical choice.
Because of the life of the mother.
Because of the life of the mother, sure. How do you decide? What if there's only a 2% chance? I'm going to make something up, and it's been so long since I was ever pregnant. Say she's got gestational diabetes. That is a very real and somewhat common thing.
Or preeclampsia.
Preeclampsia, yes. Those do put the mother's life at risk. But there's a good chance you'll get through it just fine. But there's a slim chance that you could freaking die.
Yeah.
So you would not, maybe I am getting this. You're saying there wouldn't be a percentage.
Or as a state legislator, I wouldn't put the percentage on there because as far as what's a reasonable risk, I don't know what that is.
So you're not talking about criminalizing abortions. You are almost saying exactly what Jordan said.
Well,
no?
So
it's a
yes and no.
It's a charged topic. Carefully unpack it. It's a bomb we're diffusing here.
I mean, my take on what you were saying is that you would almost we used to have absentee voting only for those who are older than 65, or if you say you're going to be out of state, on election.
Claim that you're out of,
and now we have no reason absentee voting where anybody can go and vote absentee. Mm-hmm. Under mine, it's like no reason absent. You don't need a reason to acquire an abortion.
Okay.
Under yours, it would be you have to have a doctor giving you that you're going to be out of town on election day excuse.
That's actually
Yes.
a very good analogy. It
is.
did it for me.
It is.
I get it.
Is.
Yeah.
And as far as the rape, a police report would do. Like, I went to the police, said I was raped. They concluded I was. That, to me, that's a
So it
reasonable-
requires third-party verification of a rape.
Well,
That's
they
a-
concluded
is rape on our
I
list?
was. The police don't do that.
Oh, okay.
Hold on.
You understand what there needs to be at least a police report for
I'm adding
part of
rape
the-
to our list.
that's that's where my standard is.
All right. Can I ask, though, the fundamental, do you view abortion as murder?
Yes.
Okay. I don't. I think that there is a difference between a living baby that has been born and that baby dying versus a fetus or a zygote or an embryo. But part of the hurdles that keep me from fully seeing your side is if it is murder, what's the justification for the rape exception?
Because now I'll use this as an example. If my sister were raped and become impregnated, and she would come to me for advice, I would push her strongly to have the baby. But it's the fact that she didn't consent to having sex. That's why do you understand what I'm saying? It's that consent thing.
But if it's murder, okay, the child is born.
Yeah.
If you don't see a difference between a fetus and a born child,
Right.
can you kill the child after it's born?
No.
And so there is a difference then between preborn and born. If the circumstances around conception should not make a difference if they're the same thing between pre-birth and after birth. That's a logical conundrum that I've never been able to fully understand.
Okay, yeah, and I agree. As far as I'm concerned, upon conception, it's a life. And like I said, the only thing I can go on is, did the woman consent? Because she must have a choice. If she consents to doing the activity, then that is her consent to becoming pregnant.
So agreeing to have sex is agreeing to become pregnant.
Is taking upon that.
So hold on.
Yeah.
So let's put this on the man side, because we're all talking about women's rights. What about men's rights and responsibilities? Because you and I go have sex somewhere, you're consenting to being a dad.
Yes.
So
Yes, and I need to be responsible.
Where's that enforceability? How is that tackled?
I would need to either be involved at, or at very least.
How do you regulate that? I know it's tricky.
I don't know, to be honest. Yeah. But that's something that needs to be figured out. Because we all know deadbeat dads, I'm sure. I know some
Deadbeat moms and dads.
Yeah.
It runs both ways.
Okay, so how do we get them to support their kids? It's that same sort of thing. So it's not, so you're tackling multiple things with regulating them, and that's a hard, how do you get them to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And
in the interest of full transparency, I will make a statement that some people will disagree with. I believe that the fathers should have the opportunity during pregnancy to abort their parental responsibilities, whether it's financial or whatever.
Much like the similar right of a woman
Yes.
in a state that does allow abortion.
Because she should have 100% control rather than him in terms of whether or not she wants to choose an abortion. He doesn't get a say in that. He can,
Our
he can
courts
voice his
show.
opinion, but
Yeah.
he can't block it. He can't tell her what to do.
And he can be put on the hook for child support,
In this-
even in a
right.
scenario where he wanted the abortion. I'm
Right.
doing air quotes.
And that's where I would want the fathers to have the opportunity, if for nothing else. I mean, parents put their children up for adoption and absolve themselves of financial responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe, I would morally judge the men who do that, who don't financially support their children.
Get you a gavel.
But I think the law should allow them to do so, even though I morally, would view it as a bad thing for them to choose that.
Okay, so from a 22nd district in Michigan standpoint, like action items, is this a front runner for either of you? Is there anything to be done at that level other than
The
be a
1931
squeaky
law,
Yeah.
that really is the crux. Either
For
we
our
have
state.
that law still on
Yes.
the books, or we overturn it, or hopefully the ballot measure passes. I mean, I'm going to be voting in favor of the ballot measure. When I'm a state senator, I'm going to be voting to take that 1931 law off the books, even if the ballot measure passes, because that law is severely flawed in a multitude of ways. Because, I mean, even you recognize, it
Yeah.
doesn't have exceptions that
Right.
you would like to see.
Right.
That law is a problem.
Yes. I mean, that's something that we can agree on. I mean, at
Yeah.
the very least, I would rework the 1931 law to have
incorporate some?
yes.
Yeah. The tough thing about this topic I'm noticing is the logic tracks both ways.
Yes.
So it comes down to, drawing your wiggly lines again.
Yes.
So good job navigating that minefield, both of you.
And I'm not saying that, where I stand, I understand that there's going to be, assuming I win, I understand that there's going to be a lot of other people like Jordan. So will I get everything that I want? Probably not, but I'd have to be willing to at least negotiate to that point where I get some of what I want. And I would be willing to do that in order to get some of what I want.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, we could stay on this topic. But we're not gonna. We can come back to it because, I mean, there's just so much in there.
I mean, you know me, I'm willing to talk forever on anything.
Yeah.
so.
Well,
And I'm more of a listener.
okay. So here's what prompted that comment out of my mouth. I'm thinking, what would you say to the woman who feels like she was stripped of rights that she had? Like, what do you say to the person standing right in front of you saying, like, I'm trying to think of an analogy that works for a man. Like if somebody came to you and said, like the face tattoos, but what if it's, you can't circumcise your sons anymore because we believe that is genital mutilation? Well, how do you say that? How do you respond to someone who had the right to do something and it got taken away? It's just such a hard bell to unring.
Well, you have a choice. And if you want to have sex, there's many things that you can do to help prevent a pregnancy.
But none of them are 100%. So there's
And
always,
I agree.
Okay,
yeah.
I got to pose a hypothetical
Yeah.
because it exists.
Okay.
A boyfriend, girlfriend, they're having sex consensually.
Yes.
He removes the condom without her consent, stealths her. Is that rape enough to qualify for your exemption? And I pose that only because as an example of how nuanced pregnancy can be in the circumstances that lead up to it, and then the circumstances that occur with potential birth defects and all that as well. You can try to legislate, but when you get into the specific examples of real life, it's
You can be a circumcised man and your shit grows back together and you get your 42-year-old wife pregnant.
yes. Yes.
Those things happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're out into the weeds here, but
Yeah.
are those types of things covered in your...
I would say so because she didn't consent to having sex with a...
But it's not likely to have a rape report filed because
It's her boyfriend,
and,
possible fiance.
And I mean,
Interesting.
she consented to sex. Yeah, she didn't consent to that. It's real. The odds of a woman in that situation going to the police to say that, yeah, he stealthed her and raped her in that way, the likelihood of getting a conviction is very, very
I never
slim.
said anything about
No, I know.
Right, just the
But-
report of
Yeah,
right.
some third-party verification that a thing happened is what
Right.
you're looking for, yes?
Yes.
But if the woman cannot trust that the justice system is going to provide justice for that crime of rape, is she really likely to come forth with the accusation and do the steps when it's all for naught? Just so in case she got pregnant, then she can, have it on record in order to obtain an abortion.
Well,
And I've got,
as
Go
far
ahead.
as I'm concerned, with the reporting the rape and the abortion,
should turn so the camera
sorry.
can get you too. That's okay. It'll look better on YouTube.
as far as I'm concerned, the report can happen after
After
know,
the event.
after the event. So, she finds out she's pregnant, wants to abort the baby. Hey, look, this is, go to your teacher. Hey, this is what happened. The third
You've
party
clearly never been a teenage girl.
You don't say.
Well, I mean, then it does definitely go back to the absentee voting analogy of you just fill in the bubble saying that you're going to be out of town and
Yeah.
therefore you qualify to vote absentee.
It almost becomes like a tracking of reasons people give to get abortions more than anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to pose a similar question to you, though, Jordan. So,
Yes.
what do you say to the man whose wife got pregnant and got an abortion that he didn't want her to have, and he was trying to have that baby, and they were having consensual sex, and he feels she murdered that child?
And I sympathize with him for sure. And absolutely, he can feel whatever moral judgments against her that he feels. It's just a question of, is that a situation in which we need to insert the government?
Right.
And I don't see a way to insert the government there in a way that doesn't have horrific outcomes in a multitude of other scenarios.
Cost benefit analysis of sorts.
Yeah.
Almost like saying by having unprotected sex, he knew going in that he risked her having an abortion if she got pregnant. Other side of the coin, does that
Yeah.
track?
Yeah. I understand. Yeah.
And I mean, you just have the simple fundamental concept of bodily autonomy, and whether or not you can be forced to donate blood or an organ, or you have the right to your own body. Your spouse may want you to be an organ donor, and you say no. Yeah, they can be mad at you, but
Right.
it's your body. And when you die, if you didn't check the box that you're an organ donor, even if your spouse wanted to donate your organs, you didn't consent to it, they're not going to do that,
Right.
under most circumstances.
Okay. So should we roll over to LGBTQ rights?
Sure.
Okay. Do either of you have a pressing thing to say about this topic? And we're going to tread carefully again, just because charged topics and difficult conversations for some.
I don't have very much to say positive so
Okay.
I view the issue as kind of an umbrella because it really depends on what realm in which we're speaking. Are we talking in terms of civil rights for protecting those who are LGBTQ from being discriminated against from their employer or
Yeah,
from
let's
housing?
break it down.
Yeah.
And we'll start with what seems in my generation. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, I guess I need somewhere to go.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Should gays be allowed to be married?
Absolutely.
Why not?
Okay. Moving right along. That was easy.
For those that think otherwise,
Yeah.
the question I would often ask people is, okay, let's say you have Chris and Jennifer, and they want to marry.
Are they women? Are
Well,
they?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, it
allow-
doesn't matter. I
Chris
see.
and Jennifer. The government can't say, oh, Chris, you can't marry Jennifer because you're black and she's white.
Right.
Government can't say, oh, Chris, you can't marry Jennifer because you're Christian and she's Muslim.
Right.
race, religion, these are protected classes. Likewise, gender is a protected class. Chris, you can't marry Jennifer because you're Christina rather than Christopher.
Yeah.
The government shouldn't be allowed to do that. That is saying who you can marry based on your gender is just, that is just as unconstitutional as saying who you can marry based on your race or your religion or any of those other protected classes.
Would you agree with that, John? Or have anything to add to it?
Well, the one thing I would say is that the people who tend to be against the gay marriage are Christian. And I am a Christian, but Jesus teaches us that if they're not a believer, we're not supposed to judge what they do. So we should let them get married if they want to. So for me, there's no issue with whoever wants to get married. As far as I'm concerned, if you want to marry your cat, I may not like it, but
so you're going extremely into new territory.
Well, I'm using that as an example.
I know, but would you really, if I wanted to marry my cat, would you stand up and say she should be able to do that?
Yeah.
I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would not.
Okay. We're finding the lines.
Because, marriage should be between consensual adults. I think that should be the line is consenting adults should be able to marry each other, because marriage, you have civil unions and the religious aspect of marriage, but then you have the government aspect. And in government policy, marriage is a contract between two people who's commingling their finances in a way that then the government treats differently than single people. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the government is justified in limiting that to two people and people, not cats.
What if you identify as a cat? Does that? I'm serious.
Right. I don't think that the law should allow people to identify as not human.
Understood. Okay.
So, now, similar to this topic of marriage, though, you then can roll it into adoption services.
That was where I was going next.
Okay.
Do it.
So, to me, there's a big question of you have adoption agencies that a lot of them are religious in nature.
Yes.
And the question of whether or not an adoption agency should be able to say that they're only going to allow heterosexual couples to adopt and not gay couples.
Kind of like the cake place, right?
Yes.
Remember the cake place?
Now, with any of these situations, what I typically try to do is I think to myself, okay, instead of a gay couple, it's an interracial couple. What would the law say in that situation? Because it used to be anti-miscegenation was much more rampant, and you had people discriminating against interracial couples. If you're going to allow that adoption agency to discriminate against a black woman and a white man and say we're not going to let you adopt because you're interracial, A, I don't think the government should allow that, and B, therefore, I don't think that it should be able to discriminate based on gender either and say, oh, you're same sex. So why should the government prevent that discrimination is because, we decided this during the civil rights era with the whole no blacks signs or no Jews in the windows of restaurants. The government has a vested interest in ensuring that protected classes have equal access to the public sector services.
Yes.
And even private sector businesses in many ways. So that's my conceptual take on it.
See, I don't know if you realize this though, but let's say you and I were married.
Yeah.
And we go to an adoption agency, a Christian adoption agency, and they say no. They have to, they are forced by law to refer us to someone that will adopt to us.
Okay.
And I'm okay with that. But they have to send us somewhere or send that couple.
I would say that's like a separate but equal. Like you can't use this drinking fountain, but there's one over there that you could use. Just stealing your race analogy.
And the question for me really hinges on, is that adoption agency receiving public funds? If they are, which they typically are, with those public funds come the strings that they can't discriminate. Now, if it's if it was a church itself that was only using church funds and all that, because churches are allowed to discriminate. If a biracial or an interracial couple shows up to a church and wants the priest there to marry them, the priest can say no. They are not obligated, because they are a private religious entity, and freedom of religion gives them that ability to discriminate.
So you draw the line on if they accept public funds or not.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, then
Because,
in that case, I do agree with
Okay.
you.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Hey.
and
How's that?
okay, so John, your position is the same for adoption as Jordan's, like
It sounds like it.
no objection,
Right.
whatever coupling.
Yeah. Yes. Whatever couple wants to.
Do we require a couple? Let me go there. What if I
I
just want to
wouldn't.
go adopt a kid?
I wouldn't require a couple.
Okay.
I mean, I
I-
obviously check to see if it's a good home.
Right.
you know,
That to the
sort
best of
thing.
your abilities,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean, I don't think my brother's going to watch this, but I will say that he's a single bachelor that he really wants a kid, and I would love to see him be able to adopt a child, but I also know it's not likely to occur because he is a single man.
Does he
And
get
I'm in the
turned
same
away?
situation,
I don't think
but I
he's
haven't
actually.
tried.
Yeah.
He hasn't tried either. I think there's that assumption that it's a futile cause.
Yeah.
It's not it shouldn't be easy. Like people.
It shouldn't be. And
Right.
adoption agencies are more willing to send them to a single woman than they are a single man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys get a
For
bad rap.
whatever.
Cultural inherited
And
conversations
honestly,
about
I
things.
think women tend to make better parents anyway. So
I've seen some things.
As far as implementation, should Elliot Larson be expanded to include LGBTQ community
Yes.
in their protections? Absolutely. You have the recent Supreme Court case, which states that basically already are. You don't need to change, but I still would just like getting rid of the 1931 abortion law, even if the ballot measure passes.
Right. Have the formality.
Yeah, just
Make it
and
clean.
yeah, there's no reason not to double up on it.
So I'm going to dial into the trans community for a second,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a tough one in some circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind is the swimming thing.
Yeah.
That whole, you know what I'm talking about? Okay,
Yes.
trans woman,
Yep.
a women's category swimming, and then people just are beside themselves with outrage.
Yeah.
Mostly, that's the noisy ones.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what is your position on how to handle that?
well, it's my opinion that if you're born male,
From a chromosomal standpoint or
Yes.
a genitalia standpoint?
chromosomal.
Okay, so you're
if you're a man
rocking an XY.
yes, then you shouldn't be able to compete in women's sports because
What about other women's things? Like, and I'm doing air quotes, like women's things. Like I'm having a women's retreat, or I don't know.
okay,
I
if
got
you have
nothing.
the sex change, I'm okay with a woman going in or a trans woman going into a women's restroom. But that's kind of where I draw the line. If you had to go through that change,
Okay. So no to competing in sports, but yes to using the bathroom.
right?
Okay.
Because women, I know this may get some political flack, but women tend to be less athletic than men. So I want to protect, my nieces. If my nieces have good athletic ability, I want them to be able to succeed against other women, just like I'd want my nephews to succeed against other men if they had that athletic ability as well.
Okay. So XY chromosome, that's where the line
Yeah.
is.
And I wouldn't have a problem with if the trans community wanted to set up their own division. Like, okay, these people are trans people. We're going to have them compete.
So trans women category,
Or
trans men category.
or you could put them into just one overall category. How they,
So all trans men and women competing against each other.
it could be that, or it could be separate as you suggested. I wouldn't have a problem with any of that.
So in a hypothetical scenario, and then Jordan, I know you've got a lot to say on this. If you are a trans man, competing against other men, do we have a problem there?
They were born XX.
Born
Right.
XX. Yep.
I
Went through
would
the
wa-
surgery,
I-
doing the shots.
I would prefer that they still compete against women, but I will say,
Yeah,
will
it's
say,
a hard
say
topic.
this. Any woman that can compete and beat men, I say go for it.
So you would say yes to XX competing against XY.
Because women are inherently less athletic. Okay.
Okay. No, it's good. It's fine.
I know it's kind of.
It sounds sexist, but I mean, there is a reason why we distinguish men's sports and women's
That's
sports.
why I keep going back to XXXY.
Right,
I don't know if women are less athletic, but we maybe have a hormonal. Why do women always have to take the inferior?
Okay.
You guys have this crazy different hormonal thing that happens to you.
There's something
Makes you
different that
more
make
muscles.
men,
Less compassionate. I know.
you know, men just tend to be like faster at track and things like that. I'm not judging.
No, you got more muscle density.
Right, yeah.
Like biologically, you are XY chromosomes, and I'm going to try and dump the men-women word because that's the social stigma that comes with the sexes. What if we just talk about chromosomals? Can we do that?
So
Okay.
I think a lot of this comes down to you have two different standard deviations of the populations based on their chromosomes.
Everybody get out your statistics
Yes.
brain from college.
And in general, those that have an XY chromosome are at a higher, muscle mass and all those things on the standard deviation. That's not to say those at the low end then wouldn't be similar to, the XX standard deviation more, or those on the XX scale at the high end. You do have overlap. That is a part of natural deviation. Mm-hmm. Likewise, we are all individually, even, everybody within the XY community has natural deviation. Some people are taller, some are shorter. We do distinguish between categorical, competitions, men versus women, based on the chromosomes. We also do it based on weight class in things like wrestling and certain things. You could also say that somebody who's got the natural genetics of being taller has an advantage in basketball, and so should somebody who's smaller, should they be able to compete against people who are smaller? You get arguments about having an unfair advantage due to your genetics. Mm-hmm. And that is what a lot of this boils down to when it comes to the trans athletes. Now, we have to acknowledge it's not a prevalent issue. It's not. It gets a whole lot more play in the media than it really justly deserves. Because
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. This is not something we're all facing in our daily lives.
Right.
But the reason it gets so much play is because it is such a complicated and difficult
And
topic.
shocking.
Well, and it's a representative example of what our people in our trans community face with on a day to day.
Yes.
Right? It says a lot in one little circumstance.
So conceptually, where I stand on this is I am an advocate for local control. I think those closest to the situation, just like with abortion, the doctor and the pregnant woman, here with the athlete who wants to compete, in girls basketball, I don't think that a blanket policy set by the state is necessary. I would rather empower those who know the student and know where they are at in their development and know where they are at in terms of their identity.
So let's take it off of a student.
Okay.
Because
I was thinking it was like someone that was 8, talking about someone who was 18 and older.
some other competitive venue, because what popped into my head and triggered the question is, how is this different than from saying, okay, if we make it local control for racism, then we could end up in a community where the blacks do have to eat at a different restaurant.
Well,
It's different for sports.
As far as local control here is about deciding, yes, whether or not that individual has the ability to compete in the sport category of their choosing.
So Olympics. The
Right.
freaking Olympics
So
gets
let
to
the Olympic
decide.
Committee to decide.
I would rather, allow the Olympic.
And honestly, I would prefer. I would definitely prefer where.
So
it was
why would you do that for our trans people, but not, you wouldn't support that for blacks,
Well, so you're saying if the
for a
Olympic,
race-based
if the
conversation.
Olympic community, if the people holding the Olympic event decided to have different
race categories?
race categories, I don't think the government would really be able to force. I mean, that's an international organization. I really don't
Right.
know.
I just,
But we would be able to enforce it on the NCAA though.
Yeah.
So that might be a more apt.
Right.
okay. And I was literally
Yeah.
looking for just like an anchor
Yeah.
sport thing that even
Yes.
non-sports fans
So,
would
Yes,
recognize.
the NCAA being quasi-public in many ways, and national.
What is the NCAA now?
National Collegiate Athletic Association or
Okay.
something.
I would
like
bet money on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's not right, it's close.
Okay.
Now, and that's where I do think there is a big difference between when the competition is low stakes, like 12-year-olds.
But low stakes to the observer doesn't mean low stakes to the performer. This could be a make or break moment in a young girl or boy's life, even at the school level.
Okay, but so take a 12-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and that the girl who's on the basketball team loses and gets upset because on the other team there's a trans girl. Yeah, that's unfortunate for her, but at the same time, they could say, oh, well, there's that really tall 12-year-old, just abnormally, just really, really tall. And that was an unfair advantage as well, almost in a way. Like, you can always chalk it
So
up.
let's use the sport of arm wrestling.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a 1-to-1.
competition.
Yes, international competition.
Let's turn the cap, or is that the Sylvester Stallone
Right.
over the top? There
Yeah.
it is.
Okay. So that's funny because I totally didn't even think about that, but you're right. That is a real thing. You're saying let the sanctioning body of the sport in question make their own dang rules like they already do.
I view that as preferable to blanket policies being set by politicians. I'd be more comfortable in allowing that to play out that way, because when the politicians get in and do blanket, then again, it's really difficult for them to account for the nuance of where a trans person may be in their.
I want to know why you don't have nuances around guns, but we'll come back to that.
Well, I have nuance around
messing with
how they're designed.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Is there anything from an implementation standpoint in the seat, should you win, that has to be done or that you would spearhead doing about this?
Well, the only thing
Before
that
it.
would be implementable would be, at least I think, would be at the Michigan High School Athletic Association.
Okay.
But at that point in time, well, before you answer what we can implement, the question you have to ask is, should someone that's under 18 have a sex change? So at what point in time should that be okay? And
That's another piece of this
No, yeah,
whole
that's a good
conversation to
question,
unpack.
and
Sure is.
and honestly, there is no good answer for that.
Right. Because it's consequential in either direction.
Right. And because it's lifelong consequences, I would say that they shouldn't be able to have a sex change until they're at least 18. Bare minimum.
So let's imagine
And
The
when
sports-
they're 18, they're no longer in high school, so that makes what the two of us can do at a sports thing.
so a trans man could
Right.
be a trans man without any sex change stuff and living their life as a man and competing in high school sports. So for that situation where there's been no sex change, it's literally the accoutrement. You've got the socially tagged feminine or girl clothes or this gets very into social
So
more
are
norms.
you referring to a trans woman there, like someone who
Oh, yeah, I'm
outwardly
sorry.
a woman?
Yes,
Okay,
no, I'm
okay.
sorry. I flip-flopped
Yeah.
it in the middle of my sentence, in the
Yes.
middle of my
So
example.
a man that identifies as a woman.
Well, let's do trans man because that's where I was actually going.
Yes.
So with, it's hard to not sound sexist when talking about this, but a trans man, so XX chromosome, but doing the culturally acceptable boy things, formerly known and often known as a tomboy.
Yes. My take on, the question that you posed with regard to surgeries and such.
Right.
Again, I would typically defer to the doctor and the patient to make most of those decisions. I am open. This is still a relatively new discussion.
It is.
And so I still have more that I could learn. But I would, at this point, be comfortable prohibiting bottom surgeries for the trans community until they are adults. When they're adults, they gain full rights and have those surgeries. Top surgeries or hormonal treatments, I would leave up to
Can
doctors.
you define that? Because I've not ever heard that language.
Neither have
Top
I.
surgeries and bottom surgeries. I'm thinking like,
So top is
tits and
mastectomy.
asses.
Yeah, mastectomies.
oh, really? I'm right.
Yeah. Oh no. It's
Okay.
fairly straightforward in that regard. And the question of whether or not minors are getting these surgeries, there are examples of minors receiving top surgeries.
In both ways, like in breast enhancement,
Yes.
reduction,
Yes,
removal,
exactly.
make them, take them.
But as far as bottom surgeries, I am not certain if there have been any minors who have received those, and that's part of the reason why I'm okay with that being prohibited. You can still do the hormonal treatments and all those things as advised by, the patient and their doctor. It's a decision for them. I don't think that a top surgery is as consequential for the long term.
And I would have to see the information on that before I make any conclusion on that. But that's why I'm leaning wait till they're 18 before they start making that decision.
So let's set that aside and go back to the sports. You had mentioned the high school athletic association, something.
Yeah. Michigan. It's called the MHSAA, Michigan High School Athletic Association.
So from a state government standpoint, what is there like an implementation that you would go to them and say, you can make your own rules? It sounds like Jordan would say, make your own rules. You're the governing body for sanctioning these high school sports. Sex changes aside.
Okay.
Do you allow or encourage like everybody to play in all the sports, or do we keep men's and women's? It gets difficult.
I'm still at that point where because that they're all but a very slim margin are above 18 or are all younger than 18.
Yeah.
So I would keep them separate, men's and women's.
Okay.
By
chromosome.
By chromosome, yes.
Got it. Got it. It took me a minute to figure out my question too. Yeah. Sorry.
I don't think that the law needs to distinguish between those who have done the bottom surgery and not with regard to how they. So when it comes to bathrooms, you had said those who have done the sex change.
Yeah.
I don't think a bottom surgery is necessary to choose the bathroom that you're most comfortable with going into. There are a lot of trans men who look as masculine as me, maybe with more hair. But, the idea that the law would force them to go into the same bathroom as my daughters, I don't think the law should be doing that. If they wanted to choose that, that's, that it should be their choice as to which bathroom they are most comfortable with, regardless of what's between their legs.
Okay. And by all means, I'm not saying that trans folk will do this, but this is a worry of mine, and I understand that it may not be as prevalent as the media may make it out to be, okay? But my worry is, okay, so let's say I'm a rapist. I then can say, well, I identify as a woman, go into a women's restroom and rape somebody, which is what happened in Virginia. And that's what I want to prevent.
Okay. So, I mean, this hypothetical, let's break it down, though. What should be the crime?
The crime is the rape.
Right.
Yeah.
Regardless of the gender of the person, the chromosomes of the person who's going in there, because men can rape men, women can rape.
Yeah.
If you're in a bathroom and a sexual assault occurs, that is already a crime. It need not be that the person who stepped into the bathroom already committed a crime, because there's the whole thing like, criminals don't abide by gun laws. Well, somebody who wants to rape somebody in the bathroom isn't going to abide by you're not the right, chromosomes for that bathroom.
But I just want to try to make it so that I don't want that to be something that's, quote, normal, where a straight man can walk into a women's restroom and no one thinks two things about it. So it's just more of a taking away that, quote, opportunity.
As a woman, I have to remind you both that we go into your bathrooms all the time because our lines are too long and nobody bats an eye about it.
Quite frankly, I don't care, but I still would like to have that safe space for women. That's all I'm looking at.
So that's a good segue. Let's come back to it for sexism, but go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Well, because, the idea that you have a trans woman that has identified as a woman for decades, never gotten the bottom surgery, though. The idea that the government is going to force them to use the men's restroom. If you think that men are a threat to women, like straight men walking into a woman's restroom is a threat, wouldn't forcing that trans woman into the men's restroom put that person in danger? If you're going to conclude that people who belong in the men's restroom are a threat to others, like a straight guy like me, if I'm a threat to women in the women's restroom, I'm also a threat to women in the men's restroom, or I'm not a threat that needs to have the law force a trans person into the bathroom that they're not comfortable going to. I don't like the consequences of the government telling people which restroom that they've got to use.
I get where you're coming from, but
so we were going to segue over to sexism, and I think that's a natural progression of this conversation because it gets very loaded very quickly with what should the rules be different because you're a man and I'm a woman, or I identify as a man even though I was born with these bits.
In what arena, though? Again, just it's an umbrella.
Yep. So I have as a topic, and I'm not sure how far to break them out, sexism, ageism, and racism. And sexism is the one that just came up with. I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah, with my statement.
With your statement. Yeah, it's okay for me to go into your bathroom, but it shouldn't be okay for you to go into my bathroom.
Yeah, and the reason why I was thinking that is because men tend to be the rapists. They're not like 9. I'm not sure the exact statistic, but I'm sure we'd all agree that it's probably north of 90% that men rape. It's men-initiated rape. And I'm just trying to take that
Understood.
Off the table.
And
that's all I'm trying to do.
Nope, I understand. And it's a weak example, really, for sexism because sexism has more to do with inequality out in the world, in the workplace, expectations that are so wildly, vastly different for men and women that certain things become taboo or unallowed, usually for women, but also for men, right? Like if let's go to anyway, you as a man don't get to take a bunch of time off work and be with your newly born person as a cultural norm. I can take some.
But not by law. There's no policy that requires.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I thought there was like 6 weeks.
We're the only
you would
first
know.
world country that does not have.
The state of Michigan does not protect a 6-week unpaid leave. I thought they did, and you get to keep your job. It's unpaid. Oh, maybe it is federal. I'm going to
Six-
show you
six
how
we-
dumb
we-
I am
we
right now.
Both sexes. If I become a dad,
Oh, dads get it too?
I can take up to 6 weeks, and that's protected.
Okay.
But
Well, this
you
is
know,
a-
I can use my vacation and unpaid or any
Sure.
combination.
You can take the humongous financial burden while you have a
Right.
new family member to figure it out. Okay, well, that's a terrible example for sexism.
I mean, sexism obviously exists when it comes to policy and what is occurring in Lansing and how to tackle it. I mean, you need to look at the specific example you're trying to target and solve.
So conceptually, do you think, women should be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen? Then let me go just 50 years ago.
Well, do they want to be barefoot and pregnant?
Good
How's
question.
that?
I like your answers.
So, yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
They should have the freedom to choose what to do with their lives the same as a man would. And I do consider myself, I think it's a second wave feminist
Yeah.
of the 80s type.
Yeah. You possibly third, really.
I'm not honed up on it enough.
Yeah. All right.
For some reason, second wave comes to
Okay.
mind.
I'm not smart enough to say any kind of wave. How's that?
So this is actually encouraging because we're having a hard time coming up with examples of sexism in our daily. Either we're so entrenched we don't see them,
It
or they're not really
exists
there.
in culture.
Sure.
But the question of policy, combating it, that's you. I'm not the type that wants to really use the government to dictate the culture. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of things I would like to see culturally occur. And yeah, there are times where, okay, this is an appropriate policy just for civil rights and all that.
Yep.
But that's not to say that I want the government imposing views on everybody. If somebody wants to be sexist, they have the right to be. If somebody wants to be racist, they have the right to be. Now, where it crosses over into policy realm is, yeah, you can be racist, but you can't have a sign on your window that says no blacks in my restaurant. Mm-hmm. So that's where the intersection comes and policy then becomes a thing. But yeah, sexism.
It's interesting. It's almost like the whole conversation around sexism got moved and is expressing itself on the LGBTQ plus community. Like they're bearing the brunt of all of that.
And going back to the LGBTQ topic, there is one more with the umbrella that we haven't really touched on that is more policy related in a way, which is school curriculum. And because you have things like the Don't Say Gay bill down in Florida.
What? I don't even know what that is. What is this?
So
do you know what this is, John?
I haven't read the law, so I don't know exactly what it says. But
right, you've heard of this.
Bottom line,
do tell.
I think the law is horrible, but let me explain what it is. Basically, it is in theory targeted towards teachers who are injecting inappropriate sexual material to third graders and below. That's the cover for why this law exists. If you look at the actual law, though, what it says is that any parent who feels that the teacher has done something inappropriate, very vague, they can file a complaint with the school, and the school has to spend a whole bunch of money defending against this accusation of wrongdoing. And it basically creates a culture of silence that the teachers now are going to be afraid to just even mention any sort of story where there's gay characters, let's say, because, all it takes is one parent to get upset and they have veto power and they can just make the school have to pay to defend their actions and potentially even pay the parents' cost of litigation or arbitration. It's a really...
And this is all a result of some curriculum that I'm
You have
I'm asking, not saying.
No.
What prompted this law or this?
My perception,
Yeah.
you have a right-wing media system that takes the most egregious examples of teachers doing whatever in the culture, and and highlighting that as like a big threat.
And that's
to
not
our-
uncommon. That both sides do it.
Oh, yes.
What was the example in this situation?
I wouldn't necessarily call it right wing, but my perception is that what kind of brought this up is there was a drag show that at a school. I don't know what age group it was for. So
That was the trigger, like our drag
So
queen
that
bingo
was-
thing.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
There's drag queen story time.
Yes, and kids were required to go that, and some parents got upset with it.
Gotcha.
Okay. So let's discuss drag queen story time, if you're open to that.
Sure.
I'm a person who thinks, okay, what is the purpose of these things? Drag queens, they exist in our society.
Yes.
What do they want? They want the same acceptance and just, no big deal. It's a drag queen as anybody else. So instead of they're an entertainer.
I was just going to say, like any entertainer, they
Yes.
want an audience.
Yes,
Like
they
a
are.
comedian or a singer, piano player, whatever.
Let's say instead of drag queen story time, it's comedian story time or magician story time or somebody showing up who is an entertainer and they're reading. Good example. Clowns. Some people are terrified of clowns. So if the clown community decided, let's do these storytime readings to make it so the next generation of kids aren't afraid of clowns. So they show up, they read a story, they're perfectly normal. And kids can be like, okay, yeah, you get acclimated. It's not a big deal. It's just a clown. Likewise, drag queens, they don't want to be feared. They don't want people to ostracize them as like something that they're not. They just want to be accepted. So they're showing up and doing story times. And I think that's a good thing for society to allow that exposure. If the content itself is inappropriate, if you had Dave Chappelle showing up to read a story time, he shouldn't be doing his stand-up routine,
Right.
very inappropriate for third graders. But if he's just reading a story, that's totally fine.
I got to bring it back home or full circle to what started the conversation, which
And
was.
I wanted to kind of say my 2 cents.
Yeah.
on this.
Yep.
As far as I'm concerned with the drag queen story time, I say
Yep.
leave it up to the school and allow the parents to decide. Just tell the parents, hey, this is what we're doing. And that parents say yes or no. If they want their kids to go, send them. If they don't, keep them home or send them somewhere where they don't have so that they don't.
It's odd to me that parents don't already have that right on anything. Keep your kid. I used to keep my kids home from school all the time, not because I objected to anything, but sometimes we needed to go to the beach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mental health days.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I stand on it.
Per parent, per family.
Yes. And if they don't like the school doing it, send your kid to a different school.
So back to the law in Florida.
Yeah. So
What does the law say? One parent can get mad about the drag queen story time, and the school district is now facing a lawsuit.
Yeah. Or it doesn't have to be even any, it can just be anything that the way the law is written, it is so vague. And it's something where, okay, my take on content in a classroom, even third grade or below, I mean, I have a fourth grader and a second grader. I view when it comes to the LGBTQ content, I treat it no differently than straight traditional content. If you can have a story about Cinderella falling in love with Prince Charming, you can have a story about Cinderella falling in love with Princess Charming. It makes no difference to me that my kids would hear either story. Now, if you're the type that you don't want any sort of romantic love involved in any story at any grade level, I mean, that's a fine position to take. But we as a society really should not be discriminating against, okay, it's fine to have Cinderella and Prince Charming, but not okay to have Cinderella and Princess Charming. That's, I think, where there should be common ground is you don't discriminate. Whether or not it's fine to have Prince Charming and Cinderella, I mean, I'm okay with it, but I understand some parents that don't even want like the concept of kissing brought up in stories in school.
Right.
And since I don't have kids of my own, I say this is why I'm a strong advocate for parental rights, no matter what it is. So you raise your kids how you want to. I may disagree with it, but I'm going to let you raise your kids how you decide to, because you know better what's better for your kids than I do.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I wrote down. I can't believe I'm going to say this. Wouldn't it be wild if we had a pregnant, gun-toting, trans female felon rapist who is a competing minority athlete over 65? Because we didn't talk about ageism.
You know,
But what a
you know what? If she can win gold at the Olympics, I say go for it.
I know, right? Yeah. At what point? Like, good luck drawing the line around that. What a difficult existence. I just had to get that out of my system.
You know, one topic we haven't talked on at all that when we had kind of said this is going to be a culture discussion.
Yes.
I would be interested in having, because I think we'll find common ground when it comes to drugs a little bit, maybe. If
Drug
that's okay.
concept and regulation.
Yeah.
We have, let me just see. We have time to touch that.
Okay. And I mean,
Efficiently.
maybe quick if we have some common ground here.
I would rather make it all legal.
And you're talking, I'm glad you said that,
Okay.
because do
I'm
we
just
want to
saying-
talk about illicit drugs, drug law, recreational drugs?
As a state, we can make anything legal we want to. That doesn't mean it's still legal federally.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
You know, like marijuana, that's still illegal federally, but you can still smoke it here in Michigan. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. As far as I'm concerned, we should legalize it all. Okay. And I would prefer less regulation, and I think the competition between the people who are selling these drugs can, as long as it's legal, they'll try to make the best product that hopefully won't kill
Their customers.
because they want to make money, right? And I think that'll make it a better thing. Also, if it's legal, I think people would be more likely. People who have problems like I did with alcohol might be more willing to seek help, and because they're not afraid of going to jail. Okay, so that's where I come down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's always going to be someone who disagrees with me, but
Of course.
Yeah, and it's healthy disagreement.
Right.
We can, because, I'm not an absolutist in terms of any and all products. I mean,
Right.
I think that it was a good thing that we have legalized recreational marijuana. When I ran for state rep in 2014, that was something that I had brought up during the one candidate debate. And it wasn't a part of my platform, but sure enough, that was what the media ran with. Democratic candidate wants to legalize weed, and okay, that. So to make the same headlines here, I think psilocybin and mushrooms are the next on that, where you do have substances out there, and Ann Arbor has already decriminalized it. It's you do have substances that the government treats disproportionately as though they're more dangerous than they are. And these substances can have net benefits to individuals. The way marijuana has, you had the medicinal before the recreational. And likewise, again, I give deference to the medical community. I would like to see their perception on certain substances carry more weight rather than politicians who are much more prone to doing not
they're lobbyists.
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And so something like psilocybin, which has the huge potential for mental health benefits, I think by the state being a leader in decriminalizing it and treating it like recreational marijuana, I mean, that would make our state very attractive to a lot of individuals who would see us as the new frontier there, the way Colorado was with marijuana. B, I think that just the benefits to society of doctors being able to prescribe this as something to help those that need the mental health treatment. There's no reason the government should be standing in the way, in my opinion. And so,
What about other drugs?
So, I mean, I think, though, there are other drugs where there is no medicinal true usage, that So I don't think, I mean, you take something, you have like fentanyl and such, which is really much more dangerous than marijuana or psilocybin. Doctors are able to prescribe that. I don't think that should be recreationally available because there are such dangers to it. But I think it should be more that the medical community drives the bus on determining which substances are allowed and which are not to the general populace and at appropriate levels.
And you brought up something that kind of made me think of this question. Why aren't doctors suggesting that we say do more of the natural stuff? You know, like get here's a bottle of vitamins. Take that instead of these drugs. I would like to see the medical community go back that way. And if they were to start doing that, I think we'd see a lot less of the
I think it's
abuses.
interesting. I'm going to join your chorus here for a second because the medical community is specifically defined in our country as only including the Western medical community.
Right.
If they
And
maybe expanded that to include
and
some
that's why
alternate
you're getting a lot of the drug problems that we're having is because they're prescribing these medications and people don't want to get them off. Get off it. Try prescribing more natural things. And I think that will put a huge dent in the problems that we're seeing today.
So
I agree.
But there's nothing, I guess I could, as a state senator, write out some legislation that kind of pushes them that way, but I hate doing things like that.
yeah.
You know, because I would rather it be between the doctor and the patient than doctor, patient, politician.
Right. Interesting. I really want to go back to abortion with that comment. You made a comment about government rules, and I want to take you back to guns with that. But sadly, we're running out of time. So I want to give you both an opportunity. If you have a top topic of the things we've discussed today, and I'll refresh guns, LGBTQ+, human rights, racism, ageism, sexism, abortion, and drugs. Is there a top topic of those that is like near and dear to your heart, or do you have any other parting words for our listeners? Do you want to go?
I'll go first.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, John.
Of those topics that we discussed today, the most important one to me would be guns.
Okay.
Because if you can't protect yourself, you can't protect anything.
Okay.
And and you got to be able to protect yourself and those who you love. So of the topics we talked today, that would be my top priority.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jordan?
I would say that abortion with the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade, abortion is the most important issue that this current election is going to have an impact on because it is so fresh in what we face as a society, what we are, now that the Supreme Court has opened it up, we have to decide what we want to do. This election is the first chance to do that. So that's where I think that's the most important issue that's, related to the ballot this year.
Awesome. Thank you.
So it looks like we got about 5 minutes. I wonder if the engineer has any questions.
I'm not falling for that. Thank you.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask.
Well, and I think our time in the studio is up in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's going to take a minute to shut this down. So thank you both for being willing to come to this table again today.
And thank you for doing this
Yes,
again.
I love it. Thank you.
I really enjoy having you.
I really enjoy doing this, so thank you. It's an honor.
You should do this more. Get more candidates.
Find me
in
gigs,
here.
man. Find me some gigs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.